with abandoned plot points to begin with. That's the easiest thing to critique it for. These guys by himself is kind of an abandoned plot point, because it was never really explained how they could work for her god, angel, father or something. So we have this guy, fake father, right, huntsman. He's like, oh, I raised you or something, because it's like I'm Eden, so he's like God or something. He's like an angel or God or whatever. So they don't explain what he really is. So that was terrible. They didn't explain what he really was. They didn't really get details. But also how they worked for him or something or whatever, yeah. So nothing of what he did or who he was or whatever. Was he like a lord or something? Was he like some nobleman but also God or an angel or something? Was he like Michael and pretending to be a nobleman or something? It wasn't explained. So those two guys and how they knew her as a kid or whatever wasn't explained, right? How did that work out? Were they on the ship when they were attacked? Like, it was just another two characters that wasn't explained. That the hot lassies, the cuties, of course they're alive, because why would they actually die? And I kept saying they're gonna return, right? But they just didn't. But they threw them in here for like a one-liner here when the boys, was walking behind them. So that's an abandoned plot point. Freaking annoying to me. Absolutely. They're not the biggest thing. But when you watch these animes, of course, or whatever, TV shows, whatever, but you watch the storyline, right? You have the main character, you have Fena, right? You have her plot point, she's like the love interest and so on, right? You have her plot point with Yuki Maru, and you have the other character, you have the crazy netto rare brother and so on. You have those characters, right? But you also have these ninja brothers, right? You have the other ninjas and so on. And they were clearly getting off with these girls, right? Yeah, there was like another love story there. That, of course, this love story wasn't the main story, but it was like the side story, right? And that really shows you how the anime completely abandoned the side characters. When after the first 4 episodes, they really did kind of throw Karin and another character under the bus, right? They kind of just completely ignored all the ninjas. Yeah, they really stopped mattering. They really didn't have any importance to the storyline, except being like cannon fodder. So they had like zero relevance whatsoever, right? And this is one of those things too, because these girls were obviously shown to become like, some kind of love, especially her, to be some kind of, falling in love with one of the brothers, or maybe both of them, I don't know, but like some kind of, love triangle or whatever, right? And then that plot was just abandoned. And especially they had this moments when they were all kind of funny and cutesy in the cave and so on, right? And to have, so I think a lot, they just didn't do anything with this thing. They didn't like have them meet up here, go on a date or whatever, or yeah, like they just abandoned that. They didn't have the felt like it should be more episodes, right? So there's a massive abandonment of characterization and side characters, right? So that's completely a miss, of course. And then the obvious biggest issue they have is, of course, the brother, Shitan's brother. He finally does appear here and also in the. You know what this reminds me of? Promised Neverland. Yeah, like the Promised Neverland. They did this thing, right, in the last episode where they had a clip show. In Promised Neverland, in the last episode of season 2, then the last episode in completely, right? They had this, basically this clip version of, oh, here's actually season 3. Look at here's like the queen, and remember this guy from the manga, or like this dragon, like he's here in the clip note. Remember Golden Lake? Oh, it's here in the clip notes, so in Promised Neverland, I guess the episode is also Emma. Yeah, I guess it's also. Well, I think episode Fena is actually worse. I think Fena is worse, but yeah, this is definitely this is Promised Neverland level, absolutely on the same kind of feeling to it, right? How they have all these plot points, right? Instead of resolving them or explaining them, they just kind of show them here as like one frame there, one frame there. It is almost exactly like Promised Neverland episode, honestly, yeah. The only issue with Promised Neverland is to have a manga where you actually can read the manga and see the extra plot points they skipped over, right? And the Promised Neverland manga isn't the best thing ever, in my opinion. The Promised Neverland is really the best in the beginning, right? In the house. I did read the manga after the anime failed massively, and it is much better. Don't get me wrong, it's much better. But it's not like, but still, the first bit at the house is the best part, though. Same in the manga as well, though. But otherwise, obviously, the manga is like 100 times better than the animes. Not just because of all things skipped over, but just the order of events and so on makes more sense. and also how they were fighting. So the anime, they win with like a button press. It's so ridiculous. But anyway, but what they did, if you haven't seen Promised Neverland, is that the last episode they kind of had, here's like here, they did like here's like a PowerPoint presentation of all the plot points we didn't resolve. Here's like they showed like 10 frames of like, here's a war we didn't do, here's this woman winning this fight or whatever. Yeah, they basically literally like a PowerPoint, you know, like here's the different frames of what we didn't animate, you know what I mean? And they're doing the same thing here, right? This is like, here's this like brother that Shutan has been talking about, the evil brothers that come and kill him and so on, right? And they had this like plot of him betraying Fena and Yukimaru or whatever, right? Or we're gonna have this conflict and all this stuff. And then this plot line was just abandoned, right? The brother never arrived. Other people in the comments were like, he's gonna come next week, right? In the final episode, he's gonna either come and save them from the Marines or whatever, the Navy, or he's gonna, you know, kind of fight them, and it's gonna be like, he might be the final antagonist, right? This legendary super samurai ninja guy. But he didn't even arrive until episode. He arrived in the last, this like photo, this PowerPoint presentation. He's only in the PowerPoint presentation. Like it's just, oh man, yeah, this is worse than Promised Neverland because the episode before was so bad too. However, though, Promised Neverland as an anime, I guess as a whole, is worse because it also has the Emma, and yeah, it's like 4 or 5 episodes of. Just terrible episodes from Neverland. Promised Neverland has many terrible episodes. There's one episode where in a church is talking for like 20 minutes. Instead of showing anything, they're just talking. It's like a dialogue. It's just words. Like no, it's no animation. It's like, I was stuck in a prison, and they don't show the prison. They just keep explaining what happened. That was a weird sound, whatever, and so on. But this is kind of the same. But the last bit here though is exactly the same. Yeah, here's all the plot points we didn't resolve. Oh, that side character's love story. Oh, that's resolved. This antagonist that, you know, we talked about for like 10 episodes. Oh, yeah, whatever. It's in the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, whatever. Supposed to be a character. The sword you care about. Whatever. It's just like, it doesn't matter. It's also to explain how the sword even works, for that matter, because it is a magical sword. It created Japan, so we see that they need to pick the sword up. It didn't make any sense that they didn't have the sword in the last episode. But again, though, like, how does the sword works? They have all this plot in the beginning of the anime about the sword, right? Being the how to create Japan something. Is it like a magical sword or something? Why was this sword in a specific cave? The other gold was just out in the gold, right? But this sword had a specific location in the cave. Like it was a very specific Japanese sword, and the Japanese goblin knights are looking for it and so on, right? But why? Why was the sword there? Who brought it back to this place? Was the sword from God? Was the sword created by God or something? You know, but how is it different than other swords? Why did God have that sword? Because otherwise God is like, oh, I'm a fluttery guy. Like he doesn't care about the sword, right? Why is sword in a specific example? Why does this is other God weapons? You know what I mean? Like, does this is like supernatural? Do we have other God spear, God sword, God's arrows? Like do we have other God weaponry? Is the sword, for some reason, the only specific weapon from God? And everything else is not from God? So it is a massive plot points, right? Massive plot holes, how everything works. Nothing is really explained, I guess. Yeah, it is not explained. There's so many plot points that have been built up. Especially the sword thing, because... And the brother, right? This is of course the biggest one. Yeah, it's been built up since the beginning of the anime. Episode 2, primarily, and 5 and 6 or whatever. It's been focused a lot, right? And then it just didn't matter at all for the last 3-4 episodes. So that was just shit, I guess. This also made no sense. They showed her this everyone dying in this like blood thing in Japan or something. But this didn't make any sense. Because the angel god, whatever he was like, well, if you pick to flood the planet, you know, you and Yukimaru are gonna smash on this ark, I guess. You're gonna breed, right? Ooh, it'll be fun, right? But if you pick to not do that, they're all gonna get killed in a war in Japan or something. But then we see they don't do that. They just travel around in the rich or something. So this future was like, God liked her, yeah. Like, it wasn't even like what happened anyway. Unless it died later, I suppose. But like, it wasn't the future. And for that matter... Like, it doesn't make any sense that this is ridiculously many plot holes. The plot holes are just so stupid. There's so many plot holes here it's like an amazing amount of plot holes. Obviously, this island turns into the ark, right? Like that's how it's gonna happen, right? If she decides to flood the planet, that's her mission, right? Either flood the planet, not flood the planet. Yeah, she's a flood button character, right? For whatever reason, why God would have that? Why would God create a flood human? That's like, it really is really stupid. You can think about it from an actual general standpoint. Why would God create a human that has to every generation pick to either flood the planet or not? Yeah, why did God do that? Why is that human doing that for? And I mean, Fena barely knows anything about the world. Like, it's just a stupid thing. Yeah, it really. If you think about it for a second, why would God make like a teenage girl basically be the, do you want to kill all humans or not? Yeah, like she's the worst arbitrary person of maiden, right? But anyway, before I forget my main point about the arc thing, this is a massive plot hole again though, because so either they die according to the angel guy, either everyone either they die, right? In the future, if she picks to, if she, so Fena can either flood the planet, right, or make it stay as this, right? According to God, angel guy, Lucifer, whatever he is, according to Lucifer, if she's like, okay, if you don't flood the planet, your friends are gonna die in a war, right? That's the future, he says it. Okay, but if you flood the planet, you're gonna live happily together with, Yukimaru and Ark. You're gonna be Noah. He turns into Noah. You get kids, right? You create new humans, right? That's basically what he's saying, right? But then he tells her that she's gonna lose her memory, though. So this here is supposed to be a future vision, but the vision doesn't make any sense because in this vision here, then she's still herself, right? And also the white hair and so on. So this can't be a future vision because he's telling her that, okay, yeah, I'm gonna make you become Noah, right, so to speak. You're gonna be the family that's gonna like repopulate the planet, right? So you're gonna stay as you, and you, when you come out, you can smash, you can bonk and get kids, right? Yeah. That basically is what, of course, Lucifer, God, Metatron, Gabriel is telling her, right? Yeah. But yet then he also tells her she won't have any memories afterwards. So this future wishing thing cannot be true. So it's like, what? That he gave her, like, he told her there's two options, and then he showed her two false visions of what's gonna happen. She was like, here's not the future, and here's not the future. Which one do you want? It's like, what? It's just so many plot holes. Like, this says, that honestly it's worse though. It is worse than Promised Neverland, because Promised Neverland has less plot holes at least. Like, it was terribly convoluted writing, even in some of the manga, in my opinion. Again, the manga isn't perfect. I think it also has some plot points, especially how they escape. The second escape thing. It's stupid in both anime and manga. The pen exploded or something. Yeah, that is not explained either way. So there are some things that kind of like, okay, some parts are a little bit, okay, I see. But otherwise, though, even in the anime Promised Neverland, even though it was really silly and they kind of speed rushed through everything, at least it somewhat made sense. It was stupid. The Emma, it was very, very convoluted, but it made, like, logically at least it panned out. Like it's stupid. It was very, like, how to say it was like the plot armor was immense, right? The plot armor was 10 out of 10, but at least it was logically, like, you could understand, like, okay, this thing happens, and then this thing happens, and then this thing is the result. Like, it made sense, but of course the probability of this and this thing happening at the same time is so incredibly low that it was ridiculous, right? The plot armor, of course, being absurd, but at least, like, the math worked out if you had those two things here. But this thing here doesn't even, like, logically plan out. It's like, but he tells her two false narratives, right, in them. So what is God doing? Is he typically God? And he's like, well, I'm God. Here, I'm lying to you, and I'm lying to you. Like, he's just like, I'm lying to you in either case. And she should understand it too. So it's, because then it tells her more details. They kind of immediately break, because the next scene, with her and God, Angel, Lucifer, whatever it is, right? He tells her that the memory thing is going to happen, and then that should immediately for her that this thing doesn't make any sense, right? Like it completely breaks from what you showed her, right? So it doesn't make any, it doesn't comply, right? So it is worse than Promised Neverland. It really is, because again, Promised Neverland, yeah, it was stupid, but at least it was like consistently stupid. This is like, but these two things doesn't match. Like you can't claim this thing and this thing either. It logically does not compute at all. So that's one big issue with it. But there are also many other plot holes. We haven't even getting started. This is gonna be freaking an hour. I'm seeing it's 49 minutes now. This review is gonna be over an hour definitely, because I'm getting warmed up here on my rant, guys. It's early morning here on Sunday, but I'm pissed off. One Piece was awesome earlier today, but this is pissing bad. It's also kind of silly how this actually, a comment I read last week, that's a good point, was that Abel's death scene was also bad because he kept dying like 4 times, and then he wasn't dead anyway, and then the next scene was back, and then he did die, and then he didn't back. And this is also kind of silly how it's so overplayed on the superficial, oh, it's so sad, little Fena, you know, even though I feel the love story hasn't been really built up, and so I'm kind of out of it. But sure, it's kind of sad. But then immediately afterwards, she's like, oh, I'm dying, Fena, you know, and immediately afterwards, she's fine. So I'm just saying that emotional, the build-up, or like the emotional consistency, it's similar to the Abel thing, which is like, oh, I'm dying, Fena, you're dying, and then, actually, I'm fine, I'm here, but who are you? I'm Fena, yeah, like immediately the next scene, they didn't kill her off anyway, yeah. So that's one thing that's like, just sort of like a more nitpicky level, but I still think that emotional lack of character, or like consistent like character, I was call it like result or whatever, was sent in with Abel, right? One other thing that I didn't explain from a plot hole standpoint is who was Cody. Like, so it's really badly written, this anime. It's terribly badly written with all these plot points. It really is, right? Because, I mean, obviously I read it, but this is also really badly written. So, as I mentioned before I watched the episode, for reaction part, right, that Cody was also an angel or whatever he is, something like that. And he's working with like Lucifer or whatever Abel was supposed to be at Abel. Sometimes I say Abel, but it's Abel, right? I say Abel as in it's a Bible term, yeah, Abel. Or it's the same in Swedish, Abel. So whatever, Abel, Abel, you know, the son of Adam and Eve, yeah. He was working with Cody, but Abel was like Lucifer or something. He was like the snake, or he was like possessed by the demon or whatever, right? Or maybe using power, but at least he had powers. They never really explained what Abel was in the end, but he had powers. He had magical powers, and that is like, you know, whatever we say. If he's Lucifer, or just a possessed human, or if he was part of God, or whatever Abel was, he had powers, right? So he worked with Cody at this ship and so on, right, and this whole thing. But it's like, how did he, even if you ignore that he couldn't understand that Cody also had powers, even if they both were like some kind of angels. I'm Lucifer, this guy is like Gabriel or whatever. And like, as I mentioned earlier, I see it again, but I'm a huge fan, okay? I love Supernatural, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, right? And I made it earlier as a reference, but I feel in that TV show, again, it also has a great anime for that matter. Really? Supernatural anime, fantastic anime. But anyway, and both and even the dub is fantastic, because the dub really is fantastic. But anyway, I think it's a good example of stuff like that TV show and also anime that has a lot of angels and demons and so on, right? And they always know basically, right, if someone else also has powers, right? Because if I am like a powerful archangel, I probably know if you were an archangel hiding in even body, because you have a lot of power emitting, right? And of course, this anime doesn't explain what Abel is in a detail whatsoever. It's like, is he the demon? Because he entered heaven, right? He entered the Eden heaven thing, and then the whole thing turned into like a hell. So he had immense powers to like change the surrounding world around him, right? He was by far stronger than a human, yeah. I guess some people can argue it's purely visual, and it's all in his head or something, but that doesn't make any sense, because Fena and Yukimaru sees that the heaven is turning into hell, right? So his power, him is entering heaven made it become hell, right? So you have to see him as the snake. So I would say and the snake usually then being Lucifer, right, in the Bible, because he re-enters the heaven, and then heaven becomes hell, right? So you have to see him as a demonic presence, right? That kind of corrupts the world around him. So he clearly, and it also goes, as I mentioned earlier, Abel is able to find the right path. He's able to do the puzzles right and so on. He has the power to, like, you know, he has evil powers to scout the world or whatever. Right? So anyway, again, then he's working with Cody, and we could argue that he can't see that Cody is also has powers, right, because of his powers or so on. But an issue here then that I'm coming, of course, because before I said these issues before I even watched the episode, right? I said that it's a big issue, right? That Cody worked with Abel for years, and Abel being basically Lucifer couldn't figure out that he was like Gabriel or whatever. Yeah, like it's really, really stupid, right? Or Michael or whatever. Yeah, like it's really weird. But I said that then before the episode, like, well, maybe they're gonna explain how he did it, right? Yeah, right. They didn't explain anything. Yeah, that's an issue here, right? So Cody or Huntsman doesn't explain shit, right? He's like, I am an angel. Like, okay, but he doesn't explain why he worked with Abel. He doesn't explain what he was on the ship for. He doesn't explain how he got hired by Abel, right? How he got the work. Did he tell Abel where to go? It's like, it is so badly written. This is such a terrible anime. The plot holes are immense. This is a complete garbage fire in every possible way. Because, I mean, just think about it, right? He could have just spent like a minute explaining how he has been manipulating Abel to do what he wanted. If anything, one way to really solve a lot of issues with Abel is if Cody explained that he was controlling Abel, right? He was manipulating him to be the bad guy, to force Fena to go to heaven so he could, control the flood thing. If that was explained, then he's like, when he killed me as Huntsman, I fake died and I turned into Cody so I could control him, or something like that, right? That would have meant, that would have made so much more sense if he had that in his strategy. But he just didn't. He didn't explain shit. He was like, yep, I worked with Lucifer for like 10 years. We were like, okay, why? How? What did you do with Lucifer? I was his cabin boy for 10 years though. Great strategy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And another plot hole is that, of course, he got killed by Abel, right? I mean, the other one, yeah, the Huntsman guy got killed by Abel because he didn't actually die, but he's like an angel, so he didn't die, right? Like, he's like Michael or whatever. So he didn't die, but he still left Fena to go on this ship and almost die. So, like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like, his whole idea is to protect Fena, right? To, like, breed Helen. He has two goals, right? He has to protect the maiden of choice, right? The fate maiden, right? He has to protect her, make her get children so they can make the same decision, right? And then bring the maiden to heaven so she can decide to either kill all humans or not, right? Like, that's his goal, right? So, when he's getting stabbed and dying by Abel, he then let Fena go alone on a ship, right, and almost die, right, with incredibly high chance of dying. But given he's like an angel, why wouldn't he just use his powers to not get killed? See what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense because he's so much easier, of course. Because the plan is so stupid. The plan is incredibly dumb. Like, he's like, oh, I am immortal. He's an angel. He's like, I'm immortal, right? So why did he abandon Fena as a... You could argue he needs to let her free so he can make her own life or something and meet her friends. And it was part of... I mean, he could say it was part of destiny or something, right? It was part of destiny to let her go free or something from his fatherhood. So, she would like... we'll see it here when she... I'm trying to find a scene when he's like... being her dad or something. You could argue that it was like, here it is, yeah, he's her papa right there. So he raised her, right? And I guess you could argue that he was like, it was your destiny that on that day I would fake die, so you would have to be raised by someone else, part of the general plan. But he doesn't say that. He doesn't seem to be the part of the plan. And the thing is, and it doesn't make any sense then, because with Helena, her mom, right, he was basically, obviously with Helena, when she was seducing Abel, then he told Helena, no, you have to do the dad instead. That's better blood. You have to get the pure blood from the dad, even though the son is the prince, so we be the same bloodline. But whatever, that also wasn't really ever explained, why she couldn't just sleep with, get pregnant by Abel. And also, in my opinion, it is implied that Fena would be maybe Abel's daughter, right? Because it feels like the anime kind of implied that she'd had sex with both the father and the son in Abel's flashback, in my opinion, arguably. Because, no, it kind of comes off as that she first slept with Abel, right? And then he told her, Huntsman told her that, no, you need to do the dad instead. And then she went and did the dad and got pregnant, right? But arguably, she could have already been pregnant by Abel. I honestly think that is implied that he's the actual father, right? Of Fena. It makes it more intriguing, at least in my head there. But definitely implied that she did both, right? And how would she know who's the real father? This is like, what is it? 17th century, 18th century. It's not like she had like a parent test, right? But anyway, Huntsman, he clearly raised Helena, I guess, the whole life, because he was still with Helena. Where she was a teenager, right? Sleeping with people. He was like, yeah, you go, girl. That's my daughter. Sleep with the prince. He's like, yeah, you go. And I was like, actually, take the king instead. Take them both. Woo, get those manhood, He was like, yeah, you go, girl. So he was there with her, right? Protecting her, I guess. And also, of course, making her, do it, right? Because he needs to get the bloodline going, right? He needs to breed them, right? Because he's like an alien, has to, make that... Yeah, the white bloodline kind of go on. And I mean white because they call the La Pulse. I don't mean white to the skin, but like they have like a magical bloodline that is called the white, right? Honestly, it's not me, anime. Don't take this wrong now, people. No, but like they call it that, right? It's like they have a, the ice bloodline, whatever in Naruto. Like, yeah, these guys are like, they call it that in French, right? They are like, oh, this is the crystal bloodline. Yeah, that's what they call this anime. They're like, yeah, she's the bloodline of the, of that color. It's like, what? Like, that's what they call them, though. But of course, she's very, very pale, though. Yeah, they're more almost like, I guess, because they don't have any pigment in the hair, though. Yeah, like, almost like, yeah, I mean, it's like blonde, but sometimes they look more like marble, I guess, something, the hair. They have like kind of marble hair going on. But anyway, my point, of course, is that he definitely raised Helena, right? From the beginning, I guess, and kept raising her, and kept being with her until she died, I guess, right? And then he instead took over for Fena. So there he was kind of like the father, right? For, father-dad thing for Helena, right? The whole way there, I suppose. But then, when he gets stabbed by Abel, he abandons Fena. And it doesn't make any sense, because if she would die, all this probability of her dying on the ocean alone and so on, and these people that saved her and so on, he couldn't know that. He couldn't know that she wouldn't just get odd, right? She was like taken in by some random perv at some island, and she was almost sold off like some kind of slave, right? Like, episode 1 is about her being sold as a sex slave, right? And this guy is like, oh yeah, I'm protecting the purity of the magical maiden bloodline. What? What if she got, sold off as, a victim of that thing? Then wouldn't that really corrupt the bloodline? Because he needs to have like a royal bloodline in it. And then she will get pregnant by some, random douchebag in an alley. I don't know, sold off to some guy as a slave. Whatever, right? Like, wouldn't that really ruin the royal bloodline thing? I guess unless this buyer is like king, I guess, but you know what I mean. So that would really run the bloodline. So his whole strategy doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And also then again back to the whole thing that he did fake die, because he's an angel, he didn't die. So he could just beat up Abel. He could have just slapped him away, right, and kind of survive the blow and be, oh, I'm fine, honey, let's go on the ship, right. And then of course later on he could have been like, oh, it's just a flesh wound or whatever. But you know what I mean. There was no point of him dying there, because by fake dying, he almost incredibly likely would have lost his the golden child, right? So yeah, his behavior makes zero sense. And at least if he then had explained here in this terrible episode did he really explain why he turned into Cody or how that works? Like if he has some kind of limit to his powers. He was like, well, if he stabbed me, I'm an angel, I am Michael, so I can't die. Like, I'm immortal. But being immortal doesn't mean you can't, like, have to repair, right? So after he stabbed me, I have to return to Eden to, like, heal, and then I'm fine, right? So then I became a boy instead of becoming a man, because I died as an adult, so then I got revived as this kid form, right? Because it's like a god power thing. So now then, I had to infiltrate the Abel's court, right, as a boy, so I could control him to get Fena back, right? Like, that would have made a million times more sense! Imagine him being like, well, I can't die, but if I get killed, I have to go back to heaven and, rebuild, and I become a kid again, right? And then I have to, like, infiltrate, the bad guys to control them, you know what I mean? As a kid, right? That would make so much more sense. Instead, it's like, oh, no, I just didn't die because I'm an angel. Okay, and then I turned into Cody or something. When? It happened off screen. Like, yeah, and he doesn't explain anything. Why he didn't protect Fena. Why he let himself get killed when he could easily beat the guy. He's like a super angel. He's like the archangel or whatever, right? Like, why did he lose the fight for? Well, I guess he was fighting Lucifer, I guess. But that again brings back to that plot point then. Because then you have the question, how could he lose the fight if he's like an archangel? And because he doesn't want, he wants to win, right? Because if he loses her and she becomes a slave, right, and gets killed or whatever, that completely breaks the whole god cycle thing. So he has to protect her, like he did with her mother, until she gave birth. Then he abandoned her, right? But like he protected until the birth to protect her. But of course, he lost the fight, and the argument is supposed to be made. He lost the fight because he was fighting Lucifer, I guess, right? That's kind of the only way you can argue for it, yeah. He was fighting Lucifer because Abel has turned into, like, possessed by Lucifer, and something like that, at least later in the anime, right? So I guess you could argue that, like, this angel guy, he could have lost the fight, because he was fighting the fallen angel, right? That actually makes sense from, like, that standpoint, that he was fighting the other divine form, whatever. But of course, then that also doesn't explain why the evil angel didn't know that his assistant for like 10 years was the good angel. Good in the sense that he's not the corrupted angel, but still, So that doesn't make sense either. So how did he lose the fight then? He was fighting a human before that human was possessed, arguably, right? Before Abel had powers, or kind of the beginning of his powers. He's like an immortal angel, and he lost the fight. And by losing the fight, Fena was lost for him for many years, and she almost got killed and ordered so many times over these years, right? So his plan is an incredibly terrible plan. So everything he did doesn't pan out for a second. It is really terrible. Yeah. So that's a massive plot hole. I'm not done, guys. I'm not done. This is the worst anime probably this year now. This is so stupid. And I haven't even thought about how bad the episode in general is, honestly. I'm not going to cover that too much. I don't really care, honestly, that much. But let's just pointed out that the episode itself, though, is also terrible. Because the first 10 minutes is them just explaining to her how the flood mechanic works. But he explains it in a very slow-paced, very convoluted manner. So he could explain, I mean, obviously, the actual decision is hard to make, right, for the girl. But the actual, the actual mechanic of it, flood or not flood, is very simple. Yet, it takes them almost 10 minutes, roughly, to explain this plot, right, for Fena. And that's just like bad, right? That is bad. That's bad pacing. It really reminds me of 86, to be honest, right? Yeah, because 86 is the same thing, where it's like, I can explain how this thing works with ideologies, right? It's like, here's Lena, here's your ideology. Let me take you like 15 minutes to explain something that a kid can say like 2 minutes. They're like, okay, this is like here's the ideology of, this evil government. Okay, let me explain it in the worst info dump way possible, but in like the most circular argument style. So it's just saying what it is. Yeah, but it's kind of like, it's like, I can explain it here in this way, right? It's like the discussion, it's like the difference between formal and informal language, right? So formal language is like mouse. Okay, here's my mouse, right? This is my mouse. I have a new mouse here. Very, very super light mouse, 50-gram mouse. Yeah, this is a mouse, right? A computer mouse. And if I say that a computer mouse, an PC mouse, whatever, right? Personal computer mouse. People are like, oh, a mouse. I understand how that works. You click on the button and you have some kind of scroll thing here, some buttons here, you know, some DP lighting, you know. People understand that. But if I can explain, well, this mouse has holes in it. Look at this. It has holes in it. So it's extra light right there. Then we're getting into a little bit more of a informal language, but I have to explain the finer details of this specific mouse. I'm like, oh, well, this mouse isn't like other mouse. It has like a hole in it, and it has a weirder shape, this thing, and I have to kind of start explaining this finer details. I can't really just tell you that, oh, it's like this kind of mouse, right? Because it's like a new kind of thing. It's I guess the best way to call it is like a super lightweight mouse, I suppose. That's the most formal I can say. Yeah, it's super light, I suppose. That's the best thing I can call it, right? But what if I, instead of saying I have a PC mouse, right? What if I was like, I have an item. This item, I click on it, and then I can kind of control the PC. You're like, okay, what to do? It's like keyboard? No, it's like I click on it, and then I can also move it with my hand, and that kind of like makes stuff move on the screen. And you're like, okay, yeah, and then it has like 2 buttons, and like maybe a wheel if it's like a new thing, but a wheel? Is a wheel? Yeah, it's like a wheel in it, and it's like the wheel makes stuff move also. You know, what if I started doing that? That would be very informal, right? Almost like I could do it better, but it's like that's an informal thing. I'm not saying the word PC mouse. I'm saying that, oh, it's an item that makes me control the PC, and it does this thing. This actually is a PC mouse, but because everyone knows what it is, I have to say that right. That's it's in formal language and informal language. And not to sit here and rant about other animes, but step 86, for example, then does this very, very well, where it's like, let's talk about fascism, right? In 86, for example. And they're like, fascism, that's a word. People usually know what it means. And we can kind of quickly summarize what that word means, right? But instead, in that anime, it's like, let me spend 20 minutes, 3 episodes. So like, just really, really slowly, like, you know, in the most, like, super dragged out way, explain one word, basically, right? It's kind of like how the anime does it. It's like, we're gonna, like, pan out this whole episode to explain one term, basically, right? To some extent, right? Not every episode, but some episodes are very, very slow paced in the anime. And this episode here is the exact same thing, yeah. But even worse, probably. This episode here does the exact same thing. It's like, okay, I'm gonna explain to you the flood mechanic, right? It's a very, very simple mechanic, really. You press the blue button, or you press the white button, right? Press the blue button, the planet floods. Press the white button, nothing happens. But you have to give, but you know, you lose the memory anyway. Okay. So yeah, like that's how it works. The flood, it's an arc there. It's very, very simple actually. What you actually have to do, right? The actual what you wanna do is hard, but understanding the actual rules here. The rules are very, very simple. They aren't even, the rules are like this. But instead of just explaining to her and showing her a flashback of the planet being flooded by a previous maiden, right? Because it's an arc there. So we know the flood is true. So instead of saying that, well, okay, so the planet was flooded 1,000 years ago, right? Okay. So so your ancestor, Eve, right? She flooded the planet. She pressed the blue button, okay. Your mom pressed the white button. Your grandma, Joan of Arc, press the white button. Oh, okay. So instead of, like, you know, he's explaining that, okay, blue button, everyone dies. White button, you become, you know, Noah's Ark. Okay, like that. Those are the 2, you know, mechanics, right? It's actually very, very simple from an actual rule standpoint, right? Instead of doing that, they spend like 10 minutes with like, ooh, look at this fancy visual. Look at this fancy red mountain. Ooh, you know, and it's completely pointless. It's superficial shit, you know. It's superficial, low quality, terrible writing. It has no bearing on the storyline. It's just like, oh well, we need to make a 20-minute episode. Okay, so what's the storyline? Well, the storyline is he's gonna flood the planet or not. Okay, how do we explain that? Well, what about superficial, fancy artwork scene for 10 minutes? That explains something that one scene could explain, or one sentence could explain in like 10 seconds. You know, that is an absurdly convoluted way to explain such a simple concept, because you compare it to what's it called in English, the Tolle, something like that, the Tolle game theory, whatever it's called. But you have the idea, right? Let's say you have a train that has lost its control, right? And you can either press the button to make the train, go to the side, right? But if you do that, everyone on the other track dies. So so either the train keeps going, right? And everyone dies on the train, right? You press the button, and then it goes to the right, and everyone is fine. But instead, then some people on the track dies or whatever. You can make different examples, but it's basically it's actually like here. It's the whole the run amok train tolle thing, right? It's about a binary decision making, right? It's like, do you want to kill X people here or Y people here, right? It's like, what would you do? And then you can change the rules. Like X is the whole planet. Y is the universe. Y is this country. X is this country. You can what do you rather want to destroy? Sweden or Norway? Yeah, it's like it's like, what would you rather do? Yeah, like this kind of you can change the rules, or not the rules, but you can change the elements, right? The elements of what is X or Y. But the actual rules is incredibly simple. Do you want to do X or Y? This is X, this is Y, right? It's a very binary thing, and they both kind of mean death of something, right? Here is the exact same thing. It's like you either do X, you flood, you do Y, but if you do Y, your friends die in a war or whatever. Yeah? So it's kind of like, do you want to save your friends but kill everyone else? Or do you want to kill, just like hope your friends survive the war, right? Yeah, but honestly, the way the angel presents her decision making is basically, it's like, if you pick the arc, you and your friends become Noah, right? So you survive and everyone else die. And if you press the other button, your friends are probably gonna die in a war, right? But no one else dies, right? So it's kind of is that much like, X is like, that's the binary pick, right? And then making decision making of taking making the like this is I'm gonna say it. I'm not gonna save myself. I'm gonna save the planet, right? That's kind of the heroic decision, right? That can be hard, right, for you to do, right? For example, so the actual decision can be very emotional and be very hard, so right. But the actual rules are, again, sorry I'm imperative, but we really point out the issue with anime, right? But the actual rule is very, very simple. Yet the anime spends like half the episode, and arguably a bit of last episode too, to kind of explain something that you can explain in like, less than a minute. It's like, okay, so do you either want to kill your... this is how I would say it, right, in very formal. So either you die and your friends die, but everyone else lives. Or everyone else dies, but you and your best friend and family and so on, they survive. What would you do, right? Like that is the rules. That's the rules, yeah. Those are basically the rules, right? Either you save your family, but no one else. Or, sacrifice your family, but everyone else is fine, right? That is kind of how the setting is of the anime. But let's spend like 10 minutes explaining that. And let's become clear here, though. There's many more issues. Holy shit, is this bad? It's not even... I'm not even getting halfway through of it. It's just so bad. Holy shit. The rant is on. No, but I have 2 more points now. I'm gonna make 2 more points, okay? And of course, maybe I could make another video where I break it down more in detail or whatever, talking about it in no, but like with nicer graphics or whatever. But let's make 2 more points. One other point though, makes the episode so terrible, is that so we're spending these like 10 plus minutes, right, explaining the very basic concept of like X or Y, okay? Terrible writing, terrible writing, incredibly superficial writing. But anyway, after we've done that, okay, she just makes the decision, right? And this is really terrible characterization, because isn't it interesting? The way I explain it, right, is that you have these 2 decisions, and the hard part isn't to understand the complicated issue. The hard part is to make the right decision, right? or there is no right system, but why do you want to do X and not Y, right? Why would you kill Norway, not Sweden, or why would you destroy Europe versus America, whatever, yeah. Like, it's like, the interesting part isn't like what you decide, it's like why did you get there, right? Why did you pick this thing? And this anime then completely omits that. That's just utter crap. Yeah, so because we see Fena crying, being like, oh, my life, yeah, but we don't see any reflection. We don't see her thinking about it. She doesn't explain why she's doing it. She just does it, you know what I mean? Like, it's so terrible, yeah. Like that is just like, I don't have to say more about that, but it's just really bad writing. It's like, the episode is so lacking of actual plot and character, right? Because it's like, it doesn't explain why she does it. She doesn't explain why she picks A over B. She doesn't motivate it. We don't see her thinking about why the benefits of A versus B. We don't see her reflecting on what her mom did. Her mom has to pick also to save people, right? Her mom had to also pick to not flood the planet. We don't see, we don't see that reflection. And also on that notion, the angel guy kind of mentioned that she has the memory of Joan of Arc. That's another plot point that they kind of abandoned, right? Because, oh yeah, sure, Joan of Arc exists, but did she do the same thing? Or, and also there's some, in my opinion, there's some minor hints to it being Eve, right? Like you're the Adam and Eve thing, God of Eden. And that's not really explained either. That's more in my theory, I suppose, but still, like, who's the first maiden, right? Isn't that kind of a lacking story element? If they have told her that the first maiden was Eve, Adam and Eve, that would have made sense in my opinion, right? You know what I mean? Like, God is like, I created Adam and Eve, and every time Eve has to decide if people are gonna die or not, or something. So like, I comment this my last part, I'll comment that more later, but I'm just like, yeah, like it's no reflection of her fate. She's not thinking about who am I, why am I doing this thing, what did my mom do, what did my grandma do, and so on, right? They just completely omit any kind of actual inner conflict, and she just does decision making, right? So that is really stupid. It's really bad and really weak writing, right? It's really like pathetic in a sense. Honestly, yeah, it's just a simplistic way to write a character. And also the point that I mentioned during my reaction part was that, like, how can I say it? She could maybe do something else. That wasn't explored at all. I said during the reaction part, I was like, can't she just leave? Can't she be like, I'm out of here? Yeah, can't she just be like, actually, crazy angel guy, I pick neither. I'm not gonna kill my friends or the world, you know? Screw you, and you suck, you know? Yeah, and like, I'm gonna leave, right? And the angel's like, you can't leave, you're stuck in heaven. He's like, I will leave, you know? I guess not. Like, it wasn't even explored if she could try to escape, you know, from having to decide. If she could, like, you know, somehow trick the god and angels and Lucifer, whatever, to have to get away from the horrible. She just accepted it. It's really boring. And yeah, it's a really, like, terrible characterization, because her as a character before was like, I am myself, I am an individual, I got personality. And now the angel is like, you have to either do A or B. It's like, okay, I pick A then. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, I don't want to pick A or B, and I'm a strong, you know, she was written as, like, you know, a strong, willpower, you know, independent woman, right? Yeah, I mean, she was written as a, you know, I like the element meaning. She was written as a strong, independent woman, right? And then here's God like, you have to pick A or B, woman. She's like, well, if you say that, I'll pick A then. Instead of being like, no, I don't want to pick A or B. I'm a strong, independent woman. I can pick C. You know what I mean? Like, she didn't do that. It completely breaks the characterization. So that's one reason why the writing is so incredibly bad, because there's no reflecting, there's no trying to escape the cycle, right? It's nothing like that. And that kind of brings me to, I have one last point about the general storyline of God, but before I say that one, I'm going to give a little space warning here, okay? Because I'm going to really explain again more on the Fena thing here. So, spoiler warning. Attack on Titan. Okay, so now I have to spoil a little bit Attack on Titan. You can compare it, okay? So compare it. Because it actually kind of similar. So Attack on Titan, And I say spoiler warning. And then I have one more last point though about the god thing I come into, but just to keep on the same argument here. So the spoiler warning, okay, Attack on Titan, right? This is manga spoiler warning. Okay, it's manga spoiler warning, okay. Attack on Titan, but I keep it kind of so you even if it's anime only, you can maybe argue watch the thing, but I'm gonna keep it very vague, but still. Attack on Titan, yeah, this is almost the biggest spoiler. It has a terrible ending, okay? It's a terrible ending, and everyone keeps comparing it to Game of Thrones or whatever, right? Calling it worse than Game of Thrones and so on. So that's, I guess, the spoiler that everyone hates the ending, right? And one of the reasons everyone hates the ending, there are many reasons why, and this is, I think people read the manga I'm not talking about here, right? Is that it has the cycle of hatred kind of thing, yeah, this whole evil thing, right? There is a lot of the focus in Attack on Titan, right? Because a lot of recipes and so on, yeah. It's not ended. It just keeps going. The manga, and then he did a second, Ishiyama did a second version of the manga, and that is even worse. She's like, well, the cycle keeps going, woohoo! Here's the kid finding this thing, bam, be back to business. Without going into even much detail, my point is that he has this cycle of hatred, right? And then he just makes it keep going. Like, he's like, well, I didn't resolve it. Eren failed, basically. It's, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but that's basically it, right? So, yeah, I warned you, right? Spoiler warning, but I don't even have to go into much detail. My point is that one of the reasons why the ending sucks is because the good guys are not able to resolve the cycle of hatred, right? That kind of thing, right? Here with Fena, it's kind of the same thing. She's like, oh, I'm stuck being the maid. I gotta either kill all humans or save my people or whatever, right? And she's a character doesn't even try. She doesn't even try to break the hatred, right? She's stuck in this cycle. She's the cycle of maidens, right? She's stuck in this, like, you are born to become, you are born to, be the cycle to decide, God's way or something. God created your girl family line to every generation either kill all humans or not, kind of thing, right? So it is a cycle of hatred, right? Yeah. And normally, and again then why Attack on Titan, right, people are angry that thing, right, is because normally you see the main character trying to end the cycle of hatred. And again, another spot to take, saying, it's kind of like Eren tries and he kind of half-associated and whatever, yeah. But this is worse than Eren. At least Eren tried. I mean, people, and I agree that the Titan has a weird ending because he tries and kind of fails. In some argument, you can say it's a good ending because, it's a very dark manga, so it's like he tries and fails. But the reason I think it's bad is because Eren's powers are so immense in the ending that how could he fail? That's kind of more my point, I guess. Yeah, how could he fail with his powers? I think that's the issue more than anything. It just doesn't pan out, like what he could do and what he did. Basically, because he had such a good power, the control of his powers, in the end, it's like, but how could he not end it with his power? That's my issue, I think, mostly. Because then it's like, but how could he got like infinite power, like how could he not fix it, That's kind of like, that's the issue, I think, mostly. If Ishiyama didn't give Eren so much power in the last arc, he wouldn't, then I would buy it, right? Like, he would fail to accomplish his goals. I think that would be fine if he didn't have absurd powers. But he makes him OP in the end. Then it's like, oh, but he's OP, so how is he failing then? How can he lose then, basically? Because of very forced negative writing, so that's why one of the reasons I dislike it, right? Because it's like, it feels like he wanted it to go dark, but also making the main character turn into like an OP isekai main character. And if those are both, it's like Rimuru, right? For example, for Slime, right? Or something like that, yeah. So Eren becomes Rimuru, and then Rimuru loses, you know what I mean? That would be a horrible episode of Slime. Rimuru is amazingly strong. He's a god, kind of, true demon lord. Yeah, if he loses, like it actually dies, whatever, right? You'll be like, what? This is a Superman character, that doesn't make any sense. Eren doesn't do that, though. And also, point, Eren isn't as OP as Rimuru, whatever. He actually isn't, like, I suppose, in like a practical way, I guess. But still, I mean, it kind of becomes that in the end, and you're like, how did he lose? But at least he tried. At least he tried, right? So yeah, sorry, spoiler over for Attack on Titan. Spoiler over. But at least he tried, right? Eren tried at least. And but yeah, spoiler over. My point is, of course, that Fena has a very similar cycle of hatred to many kind of elements of what the storylines. It had to be that manga or anime. Other shows have the same routine, right? Cycle of hatred. And, of course, as the main character, the point is to try and fix that, right? Look at Naruto, okay? Naruto, everyone hates him and he wants to become the Hokage and, prove them wrong and so on, right? That's what I spoiled it. That's the premise of the storyline, yeah. He wants to become, the hero and so on. People like him, right? Yeah. Like, isn't that his goal, right? So, while Fena doesn't really know that she has to become the Maiden of Fate or whatever, right? Maiden of Choosing, she's not really aware of her cycle of hatred, kind of thing. But, and also Sasuke and Tashiraya and so on, right? But it's still there, right? It's the element, cycle of hatred, cycle of kind of that thing. And she just don't need to fix it. And it's so weird. Like last episode, we see her mom being like, I know you would make the right decision. And it doesn't sound like her mom would want her to become free or something and breaking the cycle. Instead, she just continues the cycle. She doesn't even try to break it, yeah. Like, it doesn't even try to explore breaking. So it's just terrible. And it's also, again, as I mentioned there with characterization, it doesn't fit her character. The character is a strong, independent woman. And then when she's presented with this arbitrary rules or crap, she just immediately accepts it and just does it. Instead of saying, screw you, Angel, I'm going my own way. She's just like, okay, fine, I'm doing it then. Like, why? I would hope she would try to break the cycle of hatred, right? So that is terrible writing. It completely breaks her personality, and it's just bad writing. It really reminds me of Abel winning, yeah. Like, Abel winning? Why did the bad guy win? This anime is really crap from like a normal narrative standpoint. I guess you call it unique, but the bad guy wins, and the good guy doesn't try to save people. Yeah, the good girl is like, screw it, I'm just gonna lose something. Yeah, like I don't want to save people's life. It's really weird. Yeah, she's like, I don't want to end the evil cycle of shit or something. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna believe or something. I'm just gonna whatever. God is right. Yeah, God is evil. Who cares? like normally you have a bad God, right, in an anime or a manga, or whatever, or a game, and you defeat God, right? Yeah. If God is evil, you beat God up, right? If you play a video game and God's a bad guy, what you do? You defeat God. Yeah. And this anime is like, well, God is evil. Oh, okay. I guess I just accept it. So that's really strange. The last note though, long video, long rant. I thought it would be very ranty because anime has been terrible. Like nothing is resolved right. The last issue though of this episode is just God is an idiot. I guess it's very biblical. No, sorry, but bad joke. Yeah. My last point is we can talk about it for hours, right? But just like generally. What is God doing? Or Angel? Like, it's not really explained. I think it's just so weak that the anime doesn't explain why is God doing this thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, so God floods people all the time? Because, of course, in the Bible, God floods the planet, right? Because it's full of sinners. In this anime, then, I guess God did flood the planet, right? It actually happened. It had Noah's Ark, right? It's a plot point though, plot hole. Why is Noah's Ark inside the Eden though? Because isn't the island actually the Ark? So that doesn't make any sense. That's actually a massive plot hole, but whatever. No, what I mean like in the future vision, the actual island they're on would basically become the Ark, right? So it's much bigger than an actual Ark. But then the Ark is still inside the Eden. But isn't the Eden also the Ark? Because Eden is placed on the Ark. So it doesn't really compute honestly how that works. But anyway. There's more like a nitpicky plot hole, but it's definitely a plot hole. Many plot holes. But just generally, like, why is God doing this thing? I guess you could call it very, religious. Like, why is God evil, Why does God let good people die, But it's kind of like, why is God flooding every generation? Because at least in the Bible, even if God does some questionable stuff in the Bible, I mean, I read the Bible many times in my life, and I read, the Quran and so on too, right? I read all the religious books, but I read the Bible many times. And yes, there's a lot of, Job, especially with God's classic, right? Job and so on. But we don't have to go into this has to become a religious episode here. But it obviously is, this anime is obviously based on, I guess, mostly, Christianity or like mostly like Christianity as opposed to, with England. So yeah. And these are purpose why God floods the planet with Noah's Ark. the sins, right? It's a very clear purpose. In this anime, as opposed to this maiden of choice, she is basically the arbitrary judge of should be flooded or not, obviously. And so one of, like, Joanne or whoever, right, decided that, yeah, let's flood, Yeah, let's go, right? Yeah. So one of her ancestors did flood, right? She decided to kill all humans, right? Yeah. So, okay. Well, it's like, why? You know what I mean? Like, even if she was right, people were evil back in the day, so let's flood them. But why is God like, oh, but every 20 years, I need to ask this random young girl, should I kill all humans? You know what I mean? Why is God doing that? Like, that doesn't make, like, it's just a bad writing that the setting, the actual backstory, it's just not explained. It's just like, yeah, God, the anime is like, well, God kills all humans. Oh, why? Nah, God. It doesn't make any sense. It's, if anything, it's quite offensive, this anime, to religious, to Christianity, I guess, primarily, because it's mostly a Christianity reference, right? Most of this anime. Also, of course, other Abrahamic religions generally. But it's actually kind of offensive because God isn't this stupid in the religion. I'm not saying that. I think, obviously, there are some, like, if you read the Bible, I think there are a lot of, like, why is God doing this thing? Why is he killing Job's family? I mean, there's a question about stuff, right? I'm like, yeah, it's kind of weird, but at least he's testing Job's faith, right? Yeah, there's a purpose to it, right? But this is kind of purposeless, yeah. God is like, well, I created this woman, this bloodline of females that can kill all humans every 20 years. You're like, why, God? Why? Like, is that a kind of sin flooding or something? And it's like, no, if she's angry, she can just kill them all. Because nothing here in this episode explains why is Fena the arbitrary judge of all lives on the planet. Like, why is she the ruler, right? It doesn't, except her bloodline. It's purely a faith thing, right? But the thing is that Fena is a terrible judge for this thing. She really is, given just your normal kind of surrounding. Because Fena has lived on one island for like her whole life, being like not the whole life, but most of her life on one island as a slave, right? Basically, and then she escaped that, or after almost getting armed, right? And then she has traveled a few countries, with some friends for like a few months, and then she's here, right? So she has seen, I guess, a lot of stuff just in the last few months, but she knows nothing about politics or the world at large, and she hasn't really been at like England, and they're very little in Germany. She's barely, Fina's barely seen countries, right? In that sense. Yes, she's been in Germany a little bit. And she's been in some portraits, but she's barely gone into the island. She's kind of water girl, She kind of lived on an island and then lived on some other island, and then she kind of went to a port city and left, right? She's barely seen the lands. She's barely seen a mountain in her life. I mean, honestly, she's barely been, she's only been at shore, right? She's barely went into a forest. I mean, honest here. She's been on islands that of course in a forest, but she's barely, She's never seen a desert, right? She hasn't really explored the planet, or it's just very little knowledge of like countries and geopolitics and whatever, and and that stuff. And then God is like, hey, she's like, what, 16 something? Hey, young adult lady, do you want to kill all humans? I know you've only seen like, some port cities and 5 islands. Do you want to kill every human in all the countries that exist, and you've never seen like most of this stuff, and you have no idea how Africa or Asia looks or whatever. She's never been in Asia because the island is a magic island traveling in the on the other side of the world, right? So yeah, she's never been in Japan or whatever, right? And so on. Yeah, do you want to kill everyone in Japan and in China and so on? And she's like, well, maybe, like she has no idea how it looks or how people are and so on, right? She hasn't experienced many different cultures and so on. It's just a weird thing to make this random 20-year-old girl kind of just arbitrary ruler, and then and then her mom was like, oh, here's a cute girl that the angel made her just spend her time in court trying to have sex, right? Like, what does she know about the world? Yeah, oh, this girl that I had imprisoned kinda in a garden, and then she had to have sex with different men. No, let's ask her if she wants to kill the planet. It's really weird. Like, why is God doing this stuff? Like, this God is, he's much dumber than the normal Bible God. Yeah, like, it doesn't make any sense. At all, really. And it's like, is supposed to be that she's the purest one or something, but she isn't that either. She's a nice person, but she's not like some kind of saint, right? And her mom was like a slut, you know. She was kind of like a, you know, a kind of a thirsty wife, you know. She was like, let's bunk, yeah. It wasn't like she was like, you know, some kind of innocent. I mean, she was innocent, but she wasn't like this pure maiden. Her mom was like, oh, I'm sleeping with all of them, yeah. Like I mean, I won't say it's wrong. I'm just saying that like she wasn't like some kind of like, oh, I'm a saint that's never done anything wrong or something, right? It's like, you know, like what is like why is this to the girl? Why can this like very inexperienced lady, you know, decide the purpose of all lives, right? It doesn't make any sense. And of course, the anime doesn't do anything to explain why it's actually happening. The anime doesn't do any build up. It spends 10 minutes saying, do you want to do A or B, right? Yeah, 10 minutes of its crap instead of explaining why is this actually happening. It doesn't even try to explore like why does God want to kill all humans every time? Yeah, why is God is like God has like a kill all human button every 20 years? Like why does God have that? You know, he goes a 19, 20-year-old girl and press the button or not, girl, nuke the planet. Yeah, why does God have a nuke button that he sends like, you know, like this woman to every 19 years? Like why? What's the purpose of that? That isn't explained. It's just like terrible writing. It's just like, okay, yeah, I guess that's a thing in this anime, and it's just really stupid. It's so appallingly bad writing, really. Like, why is God doing this thing, right? What's the purpose of flooding the planet? Again, look at the Bible. God is flooding the planet with the sins, right? And obviously you can argue that this girl is a judge of sins, but the issue with that is that because this girl is created by the angels to kind of be the purposeful maiden, right, and so on, it really is like, isn't her life very dependent on if she hates humans or not? So while her mom is like basically imprisoned in a royal garden and to have a lot of sex, right? Yeah, okay, so does she hate humans now or not, based on that thing, right? The daughter is like abandoned by angel father and almost becomes like a slave and so on, right? Like she's gonna probably hate humans more, right? Turning into a slave and so on. So it's kind of like this weird thing where like, okay, but isn't the person's life very important? How they're gonna judge the world? You know, people have bad life, people have good life, and so on. So isn't God and the aliens really stupid then? You could argue that's good because they have girls having different lives, and if they hate their life, they kill all humans, right? But you know, how people understand what I mean, right? Because of course, depending on what life the person has lived, they're gonna decide probably to kill all humans if they have a really bad life, right? And because the aliens are sometimes protecting them, so they can live like a nice, rich lady life and just have a lot of fun with, you know, boys, or send them away to live on some kind of slave life. You know what I mean? Like, it's really weird. So like, okay, is that a fair judgment, God? Like, one of the girls was like a warrior in a war. She was like a you know, UN of Arc is like someone knight that killed a lot of people. So she was like, yeah, holy war, you know, crusades. And then the other one was like a slave, and then the other one was like a court lady. I mean, it's kind of like, how does that work, really? Is that on purpose? Or is that like, well, some of them have really bad lives, and hopefully they still don't hate humans? Or, like, how is that a judging thing, you know? I mean, it's just so weird. And, you know, that's just terrible. And also, of course, it doesn't logically pan out either, because her mom, I guess, gave birth to her before she did the maiden thing. I mentioned it earlier, but yeah. In the reaction part, but of course, in the end, it doesn't pan out either, because so she now needs to give birth, right, to continue the bloodline, but he's not watching over her anymore. She's gonna get baby to Yukimaru. That's gonna ruin the royal bloodline. So then immediately she defeats the cycle by plot hole, right? But that's more like a plot hole more, that the angel lets her lose her powers without having babies, because her mom was more like gave birth before she lost her powers, right? So that makes more sense, that you have to breed before you lose your powers, whereas your child would have your powers. But here the angel lets her like lose the powers and then go and give birth. But I guess you can say the anime kind of implies that maybe it's not every time you have to make the route. I guess there is a point that maybe the mom didn't actually. Mom went to Eden, but maybe she didn't make the decision because it was like Fena is the one to do it or something. So it was like, you have to wait for the right girl to do it. So Fena can now have kids with Yukimaru, and then like her great-grandkid is gonna be the next white-haired girl or something. It's like some inherent bloodline that even if it's corrupted by non-royal bloodline, they can still come back or something. But like again, it's not explained right. It's not explained that. But what happens if Fena and Yukimaru's babies die? Won't that corrupt the royal bloodline? Like, won't that ruin the royal bloodline? It clearly will. But then it's like, I guess it's gonna come back to still be blood. See, massive plot holes, right? And again, God's plan is really stupid then, because like, how does that work? So let's assume for argument's sake that okay, so God is like, well, that's fine. She decided to not kill all humans, and now she has no memory, loses her powers, and now she gets babies with Yukimaru, right? So now the bloodline is corrupted, but then God is like, I'll send my angels so I can manipulate her grandkid or whatever, and as long as that grandkid is like sleeping with a king or whatever, then we'll be back at track, right? Like, why does it even work like that? Yeah, like, why, you know? Nothing of this thing is explained. Like, why would it work like that? And also, of course, why does God even care about the royal bloodline? Like, nothing makes any sense. Wouldn't God be more, pious and religious? Wouldn't God be more like, I guess it's an argument that the princess or whatever, but it's kind of cheaply written because there's nothing to explain why the King of England or the Prince and Abel, how they're connected to Adam and Eve and God of Eden. So wouldn't it be more like the bloodline has to have the right people or have the religious people or something like that? No, it's like, it's just random king or something. And also, again, why couldn't it be Abel for? Why did Helena have to seduce the king for? She needed to have a royal bloodline. She needed a royal man use, right? She needed and I guess Joanne had a French king. She needed to have the king use, right? Royal use. But isn't the son good enough for that? He's the son of the king. It's the same bloodline. Why did it have to be the current king? Because that is really way weak writing again, because it's like, yes, that makes sense from like a royal, political war thing, that if you have the son's kid, you can compete with the son for the throne or whatever, right? But this is a god talking about. This is supposed to be God, the religious God, right? The god of, planet. So if he, for whatever reason, cares about the bloodlines, why does that? I don't know, but he cares about the bloodlines. Wouldn't God be more like, well, if you get the king's bloodline or the son's bloodline, the prince, right? It's still the same bloodline, it's still the same power in the bloodline. So why would he care about the current ruler of the country? Like, if it's the prince in 10 years or now, why does God care about that? This is weird to me, that God would be like, well, yeah, I mean, you need the power of the England's royal bloodline to become the goddess girl, but yeah, like the prince bloodline, the son's manpower, it's not good enough. You need to have the current king, because yes, he will be king in like 10 years, or maybe not, whatever, but you need to make sure it's the current king. That plot doesn't make any sense. That is purely to force her to become a princess, right? But it doesn't like make any sense from like an actual strategic bloodline power thing perspective, right? Like, it makes zero sense. Because if God needs to create the perfect girl, and he needs the English royal bloodline to create this like the maiden power, right? It shouldn't be relevant if it's the king or the prince. It really shouldn't, unless it's the father, the king has the perfect DNA or something for this specific maiden power or something. But then was Helena's mom also breeded by the French king or something? So it's nothing that is explained, right? Like, this is the episode could have explained much more in detail how they have created Fena or her mom and so on in like a perfect man or something, and always do the same thing. Because again, of course, how is Fena now, with losing her power, her hair and so on, being Yukimaru? How is that gonna, retain the blood power, right? Or that this weird thing? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, nothing makes sense here. Why is God doing this thing for? Why is he so convoluted for? How can he retain the powers like this? And so on, right? And also, of course, again, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't explored, but what if the girl dies, right? And so on, yeah. What if the girl would die? And again, the angel papa leaving her on sea, almost dying, and almost getting killed by people in the village, so on, right? Doesn't make any sense. God and the angels are terrible at the jobs. They're just like, okay, this is the royal bloodline of the girl. We only have one girl. They can make this flood power. So we abandon her at sea as like an 8-year-old, and hopefully that's gonna go well. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's pure luck. I guess it's God, so the God protects her with the ocean or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, it's so silly, like, because God doesn't seem to actually interfere. He has angels doing shit, right? But he himself doesn't seem to like control the waves or whatever. If at least the angel explained that the reason she didn't drown as a kid was because God protected her. God was like, you can't drown, you know. If he explained that, then I would be fine with that. Saying, okay, fine. The angel could leave her in this one Jolle boat because God's divine power controlled the waves, so she can't drown. Okay, that would be one thing, and it actually would make sense, right? But no, God is seemingly just like the creator of this thing and has actual no direct control over this thing. Instead, it's like the angels are doing, they're manipulating people and so on, right? But they still just manipulate the people. So yeah, like the girl can die, right? And what if Fena dies now? She has no memories. And what if they go into this war, right? The Japanese war they kind of hinted on. So what if Fena then goes to Japan with her husband, right, Yukimaru? They go into this like war, of course, in Japan, and then she gets killed. Like, then the cycle stops because the bloodline is over, right? So it seems like a really stupid system too. And it's relying on like one little girl always doing it, and then they get killed. And also, of course, there are other plot holes, like for example, Helena seemingly remembered Abel, right? So why would she have the memory but not Fena? But she went to Eden. I guess she didn't actually flood, or did the flood or so on. But even if she did or not, she went to Eden, and I guess gave birth to Fena at Eden. That is never explained, but that seems to be the reason why she went there. So that's terrible. They didn't explain that, like what actually happened with Helena at the garden. Helena not talking to Fena whatsoever. Terrible writing, right? Terrible writing. But also then, why did Helena, after giving birth to Fena, after, being with the king and so on, first of all, why did she get burned on the stake? Was it because they hated her still had the king? That wasn't displayed really, right? But even so, why did she go back to England for? Right. So she gives birth to Fena at the Garden of Eden. Then Fena and Huntsman, so they leave, right? And live somewhere else to raise Fena so they can return to Eden. So, and that's also kind of weird. Why isn't she just living at Eden for? Why would he birth her at Eden and then remove her from Eden? There's no point of her doing the journey, actually. Like, there's no point of her doing the journey. Because she seems to be impliedly that she was born at the actual Eden. So what's the point of going back and forth between the country? You know what I mean? Yeah, that doesn't really explain. I guess they used the puzzle game. This pointless, right? But anyway, and also for that matter too, the whole puzzle shit anime was terrible because Fena, instead of being intelligent and solving it, or someone else doing it, like Karin, she was just like, I see the password, yeah, and just auto-played it. So easy most. It was really boring for that matter. But anyway, as I nitpick more, but again, like, why did Helena even go back to England for? After giving birth, why did she go back so she could die? Like, what's the point? Same thing with Joanne. I guess Joanne did the same thing, right? Joanne also gave birth at Eden, went there, did some shit there. Like, obviously didn't flood the place, right? And then she went back to get burned in, like, Paris. Like, why did she go back to die for? Like, there's this weird thing that isn't explained, that, oh, your maidens always die young because people hate you because of your powers or something. But, like, again then, with Helena and also probably Joanne then, both of them, why did they go back? And actually, it doesn't make any sense. It's not a plot hole because he said that the burning thing was a memory of Joanne of Arc. But then they all said that Joanne of Arc didn't get burned on stake. She actually survived that, right? Because Joanne of Arc actually didn't die. So that's another plot hole. Yeah, there's another damn plot hole! Because they said that Joanne didn't die. They said that Joanne was like, holy shit, this anime is effing terrible. Oh my god, I didn't think about it first. Oh my god, the more I think about it, the dumber it gets. Oh my god. Oh, that's so stupid. That's so stupid. They had a scene where she basically remembered getting burned. And he's like, that is Joanne's memory. He was like, that's your ancestor, Joanne of Arc or something. But that was Joanne of Arc, right? That was because then she remembered the grave of Joanne in the prison, the secret Joanne place. So that was supposed to be like, Joanne of Arc or something. But then she didn't die at the stake, or at least not that young, because she lived much longer. She died somewhere else. I mean, they made this whole point that she wasn't actually, you know, that actually wasn't lie, that the whole beginning of the anime was more historical. I was like, but Yuan actually survived, you know, and she did something else so on. But she didn't, because her memory is her getting burned in the typical Yuan burning fashion in Paris anyway. So then her memory is a false memory. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Holy shit, this anime is just terrible. Oh my god, yeah. So this scene here it is. Oh my god, this is crap, this anime. Holy shit! So, this burning of the stake is a memory of one of her ancestors getting burned. And then the god angel guy is like, that's Yuan of Arc! Or Yuan, he got like Yuan, but it's like Yuan of Arc. Your ancestor or something, right? But wasn't that point to be that she didn't die? But he needs to call it Yuan or something instead of Yuan, so it was supposed to be another woman. But that is just bad writing because they gave her the same name otherwise, when I think about it. But it does seem to be implied here, a really terrible plot hole here, that she has the memory of being a young woman being burned, you know, like Joan of Arc as a witch. But then also in the plot line, which is a very important plot line early in the beginning of the anime, where the anime made more sense, that Joanne didn't die on the stake and that was all fake. So, yeah. Like, that just doesn't comply at all. It just doesn't like compute with the whole setting of the first few episodes when Joanne was actually not killed on the stake. And, yeah. And looks like Fena and so on, right? And it's a memory, but she's from like as a person outside though. It's not Helena. It's not Helena. It's he mentioned that it's Joanne, right? And then it goes into like, because he is standing, yeah, because it does talk about, you know, the grave thing, right, and so on, and it does talk about this thing. So it's like, well, it's supposed to be like a fourth woman or something, like an older woman, or but it seems to be just like a bad plot hole again of the anime, like an oversight of the terrible writer that's written this crap. Yeah, it seems to be an oversight of all the issues that the anime has, right? That, oh yeah, she has the memory of being burned at the stake as Joan of Arc, even though I also said she wasn't burned at the stake as Joan of Arc. Like, okay, oh my god, that is. It gets dumber, it gets, right. And I don't even feel I'm being, and these are all big plot points too. Like, these are all still big plot points. But that's it. I mean, you can even talk about all the stuff. So, I mean, you can if you want to, right? I'm not gonna list them here. I can make an even longer video saying all the issues the anime's had, right? But for example, why would this scene? This is a good example of it. Like, how the anime is so badly written. You should this is more nitpick, of course, but I just point it out here. Why are this frame here? Who's this guy? Right? What's the point of having, like, okay, so this is Joanne's real grave, and then again plot hole that stuff is all right. But it's like, who's the king guy here? Who's her other grave? Like, isn't that important for the storyline? I'm not saying it has to be terribly important, but it's just kind of the way this anime is written. Is that, oh, here's a secret grave of Joan of Arc, okay, and then you enter there, and it's like, oh, it's also like, here's also another grave of a man or something. There's a beard there. Does that guy matter? Does that matter? Like, does it matter that you have this, you know, this man here? Because I would imagine, or I did imagine this when I watched episode, was it 3 or 4, right? You get into the scene, you find the real grave of Joanne, and there's also like a man grave here. I would imagine that that's gonna be relevant later on. Not like, doesn't have to be terribly relevant. You also could say it's her husband, right? But that's the thing. Wasn't she like, because the whole Helena and the king and Abel and so on, isn't it kind of assumed here that this guy is the king of France or whatever, right? This is the actual dead graveyard of like Louis or whatever. Yeah, is this a grave of like the French king or something? So that to me has to be explained, at least in one scene where you're like, oh, Joanne. Yes, your mother Helena slept with the king of, you know, England, while your grandma Joanne slept with the, you know, the king of France, right? So actually, he was buried in secret with his love Joanne, and then like your mom is actually, you know, the French prince, right? And then she slept with the king of England. So you were both, you know, French and English royalty or whatever, something like that. That feels like they were kind of hinting to that. I think that's the point, right? That she had the baby with the king of France. But it's just not explained, right? Like, this is one of those, it's man in those scenes. It kind of is back to the sword thing, right? Where it's like, oh, here's the sword. how does more magic sword expect? Why did the sword has its own, place and so on in that place, right? One thing too, though, I just point out more. I mean, again, you can point out so many issues, right? But all the issues with this thing here, you on this scene alone, okay? What is the purpose that Yuan didn't die? This actually really irrelevant that Yuan didn't die apparently, right? Because her mom died immediately, I suppose, coming back after England, right? Coming back to England, she died. Yuan of Arc also, presumably, went to Eden, right? Didn't flood them, obviously not. And then she went back and died, right? Later, though, than what the history books claimed, right? How did it actually matter? It didn't actually matter. It didn't matter whatsoever. It's just like, well, she was alive, but how did that change history? It didn't. There was like no effect because they never really mentioned what Yuan did after she didn't die. So when you're on this plotline of Yuan of Arc being alive, being actually like 40 years older or whatever before she died, right? She was like a 60-year-old woman before she died or whatever. It was never really explained what she accomplished in these like 40 or whatever years of not being dead, right? So, because Yuan died just 18 in reality, right? So, let's say that she was 60 instead. She spent like 42 years of being alive. It was never explained what like Yuan, did with that, right? Like, how did that matter for history? What did they see? Did she build this place? Did she have some secret power or something? How did that relate? It doesn't just explain it. And that's kind of the same thing with not just the sword itself being this secret weapon and so on. Why is the sword there and so on? But also just like, okay, but how did the Japanese create this sword and so on? So because the anime has all this, it's based on historical characters, right? But of course it's very, very fluffy. But it's based on historical characters. But it never really explores, okay, but Yuan's actually alive, okay. Japan, this emperor of Japan has a magical sword, It never, like, explores how does that thing matter for the historical events, right? It doesn't explore that the emperor of Japan has, this weapon, right? How does that change the history or something? Does that mean that Japan can now conquer China or whatever? It doesn't really explain that. Like here again, I suppose the Yuan also had a magical weapon, right? Or could talk to God or whatever, right? Given, the whole Yuan of Arc thing. So nothing on this is ever explored how it actually matters that they, for example, lived much longer or had a magical weaponry or something, right? Or just more magic weapons and so on. And just generally, like, why do people go back to this thing? And for that matter, my last point again is still my last point, right? Like, how did the previous maidens find their way back there? Because this place is built by Yuan, right? I suppose, or someone else. But God is doing this thing. The angels or whatever have been doing these things since mankind was born, right? And certainly they were born at Eden, so easy in the beginning. But how did they find it back to Eden? Like, because this thing is built up by Yuan, right? Or something, because Yuan's grave is here. So wasn't this built in that's 15th century. So how was Yuan, didn't Yuan die like something like 1432, something like that? Maybe I'm wrong here, I think it's like 5th century, 1400 something. So, I'm tired now here. But anyway, so my point of course is that, how did they come back earlier, right? Yet again back to this, how the hell is this system even working? Why is God letting like 18-year-old girl either kill humans or not? Why is it happening every time? Why is it very unfair for their lives? And how do they even find their way back there? Obviously the angel helps them to find their way back there. But what did they do before what did they do before Yuan and so on built these puzzle games? And as I mentioned again, I say it, point out again, emphatically, what is the point of the puzzle game when the girl is like, bam, because the puzzle game is like, it's a trial, but it isn't a trial, because she comes to that door, right, and she's like, doop, 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 I know the path, right, so it isn't a trial, it's a password for divine girls to open the door, so it serves as a purpose, like, other people can't open the door, right? So it's a purpose to it, but he's calling it a test. But it isn't a test, because because if you're the magical girl, you can automatically do the dance and open the door. So it's no challenge. It's very, I said earlier in the anime too, obviously, in the previous earlier reviews, it's a very easy mode for the main girl because it's like, doop, 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 I have the power to open doors. You know, yeah, like it's. I think that was really boring, honestly, earlier too. That here's a puzzle door. Instead of having Karin, for example, being like, what if I do this thing and so on, it was just the main girl being like, I know the door, you know. So it was really boring, right? And that again comes back to if God wants to test their intelligence or whatever, right? If they're worthy of, because if God was like, it's a lot of complicated puzzle games to open up the heaven door, right? So only the smartest girl can get here, and that's why they can then be a judge. That actually would make so much sense, right? But instead, God gave them the power to open the door automatically, so it's not a test for them. And they kind of find, yeah, and she knows, you know, what is the right cave and so on. So it's not a test whatsoever. The only test is if she has enough divine blood power, basically, right? But it's no like personality test. There's no judgment test on her as a person, and then it still is a personality decision making. Yeah. Oh, it's so dumb. Anyway, that's the rant, guys. Very long rant. I can make it even longer, right? I have barely been nitpicky, honestly. I have very few nitpicks here, in my opinion. Most of them are still the broader aspect, right? But yeah, I think this is the worst ending this year. It's the biggest garbage dumbfire I've seen this year, easily. It's so bad, man. It is such a bad anime. This plotline is just terrible in every aspect of the way. It is much worse than Promised Neverland. Promised Neverland is easily much better than this thing. This is probably the worst anime this year now, honestly. I honestly, you know, I've been so critical on, like, example, Tokyo Revengers, which I do feel has many more issues per episode, certainly. But the ending, but it's more logical, honestly, this anime. This is the dumbest garbage thing ever, just how nothing makes any sense. It's just such a... And I mean, they're not even trying to explain it. They're like, why is God killing all the humans? Because God? Like, they don't even try. They're like, well, here's a lot of fancy images. Anyway, do you want to kill all humans? And it's like, nah, I think I'm going with saving humans. Oh, okay, yeah, it ends. Yeah, so you guys have a great